Hey JavaScript LA. So today I'm on my Windows computer. Thought I'd mix it up a little bit and just kind of show people that you can do coding on pretty much whatever system you feel comfortable with. You don't have to always use Mac like I do. And for the most part, I have both the Windows system and I have the Mac system. I'll go into another video about what I prefer and what kind of system I like. But for this particular video, I wanted to go over the find method, which exists on the array object that is supplied with JavaScript. So much like some of the other functions that we've seen so far, especially filter, reduce, each, this is just another one of those built-in methods that comes with the array class or object in JavaScript. So without further ado, here I am on MDN, and that's the standard site you should go to if you have questions about any of these built-in methods. They do a really great job of giving you examples. So here I have a sample array, and then I'm using the find method. And what the find method basically does is it returns the value of the first element that you're looking for, essentially. So how do you do that? You have to give a callback function, some sort of truth test, essentially the same as our filter function. But in the filter function, you get back all the results that match your criteria, whereas find only gives you the first value that matches your criteria. And in addition, there's also find index, which basically is the same function, but what it does is it returns you, instead of the value, it returns you the index. So in this video, we're going to go over both. So going back to our Visual Studio Code, and I think I used Atom in some of the other videos, but this time I'm using Visual Studio Code. Again, just variety. It doesn't really matter what code system you use or operating system you use. It just matters that you're comfortable with it. Visual Studio Code is pretty good at having the terminal integrated with your file, so that's what I'm going to use for today. So here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare an array, and we'll just say that it's equal to Jim, and it's going to be an array of strings, by the way, Bob, and then let's see, Susie, and then just for fun, we'll throw in Jim again. There's Jim too, right? So let's say we have these 4 people, and the next thing I want to do is I want to find Jim, right? The first instance of Jim. Well, what I can do is I can do R and then the find method. Remember, this is built in. And then I can say, all right, I need a callback function, right? Some sort of truth test. So here I could just say, give me back person who pretty much equal to Jim, right? And I need a double equal or triple equal here. Probably use triple equal just to be safe because we want to match the type and the value. So, okay, cool. I use the method. Now I need to save it in some sort of result. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'll save that. And then finally, because I'm using a integrated environment, the easiest way for me to sort of play around with all this is to use something like Node.js, where it allows me to basically use the console, which is this thing down here, to log my values, right? So whatever my result is, with Node, I can pretty much call Node on this particular file, array find. That's the folder that I'm working with. And then pretty much on this file, after I call Node, I can see, oh, Jim. They got Jim back, from my console, right? So that's pretty cool. If you don't have Node, I recommend installing Node.js. See some of my other videos that I've done on how to install Node.js. But this is your basic setup to get going. All right, so that's kind of how the find method works. Just briefly, let's also verify that we got Jim from the index of 0. Remember, arrays start at 0 rather than 1. So what we want to do is we want to basically, and I think actually what we can do is we can change this from being find, I think that's probably a faster way of doing it, to find index, right? So if we go over to MDN, you can pretty much just click on find index right here, and it should give you another sample of exactly what's going on. And I think okay, yeah, computer's kind of tripping out. Windows, no, I don't know. it's probably something else. So basically, find index returns you back the value. So this is how you would, returns you back the index, and this is how you would use it. So here we're just verifying we're using it the correct way, and I'll put them side by side. So in this case, we expect 0 or index of 0 to be our result. So I'm going to save this here, and then I'm going to do node array find one more time, and true enough, we have index of 0 here. Now, if I took Jim out of this array and I save this again, then this would verify, okay, Jim is still in this particular array, but now he's at index 2. So again, like the first instance of your thing that you're trying to search for, that's what the find method does in the find index. Now these two functions are really handy, especially, again, like if you're going through a lot of code, or you have like maybe a lot of JavaScript objects to search for in an array, and you just want to find, you know, the quintessential needle in the haystack. You want to find that first value that matches, you know, let's say you're building a search function, right, or some sort of search, you know, for like some kind of a map or something like that. Well, then if you had the find function could, you know, whatever the person's typing in the search box, it could go through your array of objects, right? And then it could find back that value that matches. So let's say maybe somebody's looking for a zip code, you know, for or looking for a hospital, the first hospital that matches their zip code. So if you had like an array of hospitals in JavaScript JSON, your find could be used to pretty much locate the first hospital that matches the zip code, and that could be very useful. In fact, we may do a project like that in a upcoming YouTube video, so I'll keep that in mind when I'm making some of these future videos. But for today, we're going to keep it kind of short. The next thing I want to do, just to be consistent with some of the other videos that I've been doing so far, is to just show you how to build your own find function, right? So if you were asked this on some sort of coding interview or a coding test, basically this is what you want to do. And there are a lot of different ways to come up with the solution, just so you know. It's not just one way, but you know, this probably makes sense for what we're trying to do. So here I would say, all right, I'm going to create a ES6 function here essentially, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to take an array, and then I'm going to also take in a truth test. Now, some people will call this callback function, right? And that's totally fine. You can do that. I choose to call it truth test because I feel like that's more true to what exactly it is. And then if we think about what the find function does, right? It finds the first value that matches the criteria you put inside your callback function. So it has to loop through your array, so it only makes sense to create some sort of loop. And so we can use our good old for loop, and then basically we can iterate through the length of the array, right? And then basically we can call our truth test. So actually what we want to do before we even jump into this, right, is we want to call our truth test, but we also want to make sure that we have that value. So if the truth test, you know, has some value that we're trying to look at, we're trying to return some condition, we want to match that with, you know, what's in the array already. So if there is a person called Jim in our array, then we want to basically get that value back and return that after meeting a condition. If we don't have it, then we're not going to return anything. Actually, we might return just false. So here I could say, all right, if truth test, right, and we can say on our array of I, then basically want to return array of I. Otherwise, we just keep letting this for loop run, and then we just return false, right? So, and this might be kind of, to some people, well, this might be kind of, you know, not a great function, because like they might say, well, you know, this returns a value or false. So can you make the, you know, the return values a little bit more consistent to each other? So maybe instead of saying, okay, you know, like return false, maybe we just return undefined because there is nothing, right? That's more consistent with JavaScript. And you can still go a little bit further and figure out what kind of types you want to return, but for our purposes, this probably makes the most sense. So let's go ahead and use this function. And so I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to comment out this particular code block here, and I'm also going to comment out our console log. And then finally, I'm just going to pass in our array from above. And then I'm also going to just basically use the same callback function that we used before. So again, ES6 style. And if you're kind of like, oh, I don't really understand ES6, I do actually have a course on ES6, and I'll put a link for it in this particular video as well as in the description below. And you're free to go and check it out. It's actually pretty cool. It's only $9, $9.99 essentially, and you pretty much will learn like all of the things that came out with ES6, and you'll be up to speed, especially if you're somebody who's kind of like starting to learn what ES6 is, or maybe you used ES5 in the past and now you're kind of like confused by ES6 syntax. I know that was kind of like me in the past too, especially because I've done a lot of different languages, including PHP and Python. So for me, sometimes when I look at ES6, I'm like, what is that, Python? So it's helpful. So to finish this particular thing here, let's go ahead and say let result equal to find, and then we'll go ahead and console log our result. Okay, so I got to save this in order for anything to happen, and then finally I'm going to go ahead and go node array find, and there we go. I got back Jim. Now, what I could do is, let's say I wanted to return the index, right? Like, how do I return the index if I want to build my own find index method? Well, remember the truth test executes and basically it compares the value. So if I'm going through this particular array, right, then it's going to look at whatever the current person is, or in this case, it actually makes more sense to call it the element, I would say, because that's really what we're trying to look at, right? We're saying, okay, in this case, we're going through an array and we're looping over each element in the array, and then we want to compare the current element to whatever we're trying to truth test. So here, this is the current element. So when we call this callback function, it has access to this particular array of index I. And so if this condition matches, right, if L, right, or array of I is equal to Jim, then it's going to return Jim, right? In the case of an index, rather than returning the current value in the array, we just return the index. So we would just return I, and we could call this function find index. So I'm going to save that, and then basically I'll just go ahead and type find index. And then one more time, we'll go ahead and run this, and we'll see that Jim is at index of 2. And we can verify that the other values work. So we can say, all right, well, where's Susie? Save, and then run this one more time. You can see, oh, Susie's at index of 0. So hope this was pretty useful for you. Don't want to make this video too long, but like I said, we can do more projects in the future, especially with find, especially for building something more complicated like a search function where you're pretty much going through a whole bunch of JavaScript objects and trying to find a particular search term and then return that search term to the user if they're typing, and you kind of do it under the hood and you just have like this seamless sort of user interface, which just kind of works really well. So we'll do that in a future video, but again, thank you for watching this particular video, and if you have questions, leave them in the comments below. Thumbs up if you like this video, and also basically subscribe if you're new. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you around the meetups.